We're here to urge the governor to sign the three-bill package, AB 243, AB 266, and SB 643, which will, in essence, is the Medical Marijuana Regulation Act.
Yeah, I'm the conservative side of this whole thing, so I'm kind of the unique odd man out. I'm the Republican here from the law enforcement side. I served 28 years with the California Highway Patrol. One of the exciting things this bill does is that it addresses a very strong concern, and that is the impaired driving component that comes with all kind of medications, including cannabis. But this bill specifically addresses cannabis and how it impacts driving. And we believe from there we'll be able to have some science-based field sobriety tests. We'll be able to determine whether or not someone is truly impaired and needs to be removed from the roadway so they don't hurt themselves or someone else.
Fantastic. And I'll just add, this is landmark legislation, and I'm Rob Bonta. I represent Oakland in the California State Assembly, 18th Assembly District, and we're in a very historic place. After 19 years of not having the regulations that we need in California since the Compassionate Use Act was passed, and Proposition 215, we're now at a place where we have regulations that will protect our environment, enhance patient safety, increase public safety, and throughout it all, make sure that we honor local control of our local governments throughout the state. So we needed to be here much earlier, and through the combined efforts, bipartisan, bicameral, and really with the Assembly leading the effort here, we're at a historic place where we have a package of bills on the governor's desk, and we're urging him very strongly to sign those bills.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We're here to urge the governor to sign a three-bill package, which we consider to be the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. Special thanks to Supervisor Estelle Fennell, the chair of the board here today, Ryan Sundberg, and also City Council Member Mark Wheatley. I don't believe is here, but these folks, along with Mark Lovelace, who's going to be speaking in a moment, have put in countless hours and various work groups and task force working on this particular subject. And without their efforts, we wouldn't not have made the progress we made this particular year. I'm here with my Assembly colleagues, Assemblymember Rob Bonta, who represents the Alameda area, and Assemblymember Tom Lackey, who's from Palmdale. And you'll hear from them shortly. But first I'd like to talk about my bill, AB 243. For close to 20 years, medical marijuana cultivators and medical marijuana patients have lived in a murky, gray area where state and federal law are in direct conflict. It has prevented us from establishing reasonable regulatory and environmental protections for the North Coast and all of California. AB 243 provides protections for the environment from illegal cultivation activities and serves as the funding vehicle for the entire medical cannabis regulatory structure. Environmental protections include making the Watershed Enforcement Team permanent and statewide. Now, the Watershed Enforcement Team is a partnership with the State Water Resources Control Board and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It requires the regional water quality control boards throughout the state to create standards for wastewater discharges on cultivation sites, statewide, something that's already been done in this area. Around cultivation, it requires creates a regulatory framework for cannabis cultivation. It requires all growers to be licensed with the California Department of Food and Agriculture. It essentially classifies cannabis as an agricultural product, which requires cultivators to abide by the same regulations as other existing agricultural products, which includes all environmental laws. It creates a unique identifier program for cannabis, providing the basis for a system that tracks from seed to sale. Establishes the authority to each licensing authority to charge reasonable fees to cover the cost of administration to issue licenses, and it authorizes the Department of Finance to allocate $10 million from the general fund to the Bureau for startup costs for the entire regulatory structure. All fines and penalties collected for non-compliance will be deposited into the medical marijuana fines and penalties account. This account will be used to pay for local and state law enforcement pertaining to cannabis activities. It will also pay for remediation of the environmental impacts from illegal and legal cannabis cultivation. Regardless of whether marijuana for recreational use is legalized in 2016 by a ballot initiative, the reality right now is that medical marijuana is legal in California and has been for nearly 20 years. We cannot ignore the challenges created by 19 years of inaction and hope that they go away. That simply hasn't worked. For 19 years, we have kicked the can down the road. The time to act is now. We urge the governor to sign AB 243, AB 266, and SB 643. I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Assemblymember Bonta, and he'd like to say a few words about AB 266.
Good morning. How are you today? It's great to see you. I'm Rob Bonta. I'm honored to serve in the California State Assembly. I represent the 18th Assembly District, serving the great cities of Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. And I just want to thank Assemblymember Wood for his tremendous leadership, for having us today in his district, and for everything that he's done to help advance this very historic package of bills. And I'm delighted to join my colleagues in support of this landmark legislation, and we all collectively with one voice urge Governor Brown to sign these bills. For nearly 20 years, California has allowed the use of medical cannabis by patients. However, the state has never properly regulated the medical cannabis industry. This has resulted in Californians living in an unregulated free-for-all for medical cannabis. There are no testing standards required for medical cannabis. There is inadequate enforcement for illicit activities such as illegal grows and diversion of product out of state. The environment is being neglected and destroyed, and water has been inappropriately diverted. With this legislation, much of that will end. Our patients will be safer, because with this legislation, the Medical Board of California can crack down on physicians who are inappropriately recommending medical cannabis, and strict testing and labeling standards for all manufactured products, including edibles, would be required. Our families and the public will be safer, because this legislation provides funding for law enforcement through grant programs to crack down on illicit activity. Our environment will be healthier and our natural resources protected, because there will be funding for environmental cleanup and high standards and regulations for the appropriate cultivation of cannabis. And the voices of our locals will continue to be heard throughout, because the bills maintain local control. Local governments will still have the power to create ordinances that go above and beyond the regulatory floor that these bills provide for standards for the public's health, safety, and protection of the environment. I'm proud to say that in the legislature we had strong bipartisan support for our legislation throughout the entire year, with well over 2/3 of the members of both houses supporting the measures. And on day one of this year's legislative session, the Assembly put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to provide the solution to the medical cannabis challenges in California, and we're going to do it this year. With these bills, the Assembly has delivered on that promise. We now ask that the Governor sign these bills. Thank you.
Through the process, we have components that really prevent illegal diversion, because all of the product will go through a central distribution center where it'll be tested for quality and also can be followed and made sure that it's not diverted. And we also have a track and trace program, so there's a unique identifier on every product to make sure that it's used for appropriate medicinal reasons. So there's a lot of components to these bills, but it significantly reduces illegal diversion and makes sure that there's high quality medicine at the end of the day throughout the process.
Now I'd like to introduce my tremendous colleague from Palmdale, Assemblymember Tom Lackey.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's a great privilege and a great honor for me to share the podium this day with such great leadership. We'd like to thank Assemblymember Wood for his pioneering spirit and for his influence on this package of bills. It's the first time I've been here in my life, so it's a great privilege to be here and share this moment with each one of you. You know, I'm proud of the bipartisanship of this effort. I am the sole Republican on this package of bills, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of this very historic moment. We were able to strike a balance between law enforcement and other stakeholders. You know, Republicans have been nervous to work on this issue, but unless we want these rules written on the ballot, it's time to come to the table. So we did, and the threat of legalization and writing rules on the ballot spurred us into action. I'm not a supporter of legalization of marijuana, but that's irrelevant to this particular issue, because medical marijuana has been legal for almost 20 years. And what we're trying to do is we want to separate the legitimate players from those who are on the outside and creating the shadows that has brought despair and discouragement to this industry. You know, one of the important pieces, I spent 28 years with the California Highway Patrol. That's where my real career was. And I've seen stone drivers before, and I know the threat that they pose to our public. Yet, we as law enforcement have difficulty removing these stone drivers from the roadways. And so what California is going to do is and what this bill is going to do is it's established the Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research at the UC San Diego. And what they're going to do is determine the impairing components of cannabis. And then from the data, we could see the relationship between impairment and consumption of marijuana. And from that, we will be able to develop science research field sobriety tests. We'll be able to identify those who shouldn't be sharing the roadways with each one of us. You know, one of the things that Colorado has learned over their legalization of marijuana, 2014, the study just came out that they saw an increase in traffic-related deaths, 32%. And 1 out of 5 of traffic deaths in the state of Colorado last year were marijuana related. We will not stand for that in California, and we're going to take this issue very seriously, and we're going to make sure that people understand that public safety is a priority to those of us in this particular state. We need to send a strong message that to the public to don't use cannabis if you're going to drive. And I think that that's a clear statement that needs to be made. We're very proud of this development, and we urge the governor to sign these bills as soon as possible. Thank you. I don't know. I mean, I really don't have the answer to why there's hesitation, but I think that we are going to get his support, and I just wish that it would come sooner rather than later. Yeah, I can tell you as a Republican that there's this big fear that it is going to become legal, and I will tell you that it's really important that we get this framework established so that we can regulate this thing in a more sensible manner, and so that we can separate the rogue from those who have the right intention.
Now I'd like to introduce to someone you all know very well here, Supervisor Mark Lovelace. Thank you. I want to thank Assembly Members Wood, Bonta, and Lackey for being here today and for authoring AB 243 and AB 266. These two bills, along with SB 643 by Senator McGuire, are critically important, not just for Humboldt County and the North Coast, but for all of California, and we urge the governor's signature. In 1996, the voters of the state of California passed Proposition 215, the Compassionate Use Act, which decriminalized possession and cultivation of medical cannabis for personal use, and in doing so spawned a burgeoning industry which has continued to grow and grow and grow to where it now dwarfs the size of the timber industry even at its prime. And yet 19 years after the passage of Prop 215, this industry remains virtually unregulated, causing huge impacts to our watersheds, our fisheries, our wildlife, to public safety, to our communities, and to our economy. But there's nothing about the cultivation, the distribution, and the sale of cannabis that we haven't known how to regulate for years. We do this with a long list of other similar industries. The only thing that has stood in the way of developing an effective regulatory program for cannabis in the past has been the past unwillingness of the legislature and others to deal with this as a legitimate policy issue. For far too many years, too many people were unable or unwilling to let the word marijuana appear in policy or to even say the word at full volume. That unwillingness to elevate marijuana from a punchline to a policy issue has given this industry unique immunity from all taxes, bookkeeping standards, labor laws, and environmental regulations, which in turn has made it a magnet for criminals and those who don't care what wreckage they leave in their wake. That has to end. This scenario has made it very, very difficult for the good guys, those who want to be good players, who want to be good stewards of the environment, good members of our community. It's made it impossible for the good guys to compete with the bad guys. The black market is outcompeting the legal market. Here on the North Coast, we've had a long history with this industry, and that's given us a certain cultural advantage, a certain cultural literacy with this industry, and an ability to address the issues. Mendocino County approved its innovative 931 program in 2010. In 2012, supervisors from the North Coast helped draft a policy platform for the California State Association of Counties. And this past year, supervisors and CAOs from Humboldt,
Del Norte, Trinity, Mendocino, Lake, and Sonoma counties came together to hold a regional summit on cannabis issues, which resulted in our unified 6 counties policy statement. All of these steps help create the environment and lay the groundwork for the momentous step that the legislature has taken this year to finally address this issue through these 3 bills. We are ready to regulate this industry, the same as we regulate timber, the same as we regulate farming, ranching, or any other resource industry, any other similar industry out there. Again, we've known how to do this. The only thing lacking has been the ability to have that conversation. And this year, finally, 19 years after the passage of Prop 215, the legislature is ready too. The only thing we need now is the governor's signature on these 3 bills. We urge Governor Brown to sign these bills so that we can bring this industry into the daylight, into the regulatory fold, and so that California can finally, and for the first time, have a responsible, well-regulated, and legal cannabis industry that we can all be proud of.
I have a few words from Sheriff Downey.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Assembly members for being here today. And I think that Assemblymember Lackey read my statement. I'm not sure. It sure sounded like it, though. He really resonated with me. You know, and I agree with everything that's been said here. I have been a strong proponent since I became sheriff of the Assembly to do something. The legislature in California to do something with marijuana, medical marijuana regulation of some kind, some type of regulatory scheme. I met with both Jim Wood and Mike McGuire on the Senate side about this when they were first elected, and I told them how important it was to California and to Humboldt County especially to have some type of regulatory scheme to deal with the medical marijuana issue. We're not talking about legalization or for recreational use or anything like that. We're talking about medicinal marijuana, and it's something that we're not going to put this genie back in the bottle. It's here to stay. There are studies that go both ways on whether it's good or bad or what it does for people, but there's plenty of people out there that say that it's helped them, and they want to continue to be able to legally use medical marijuana. You know, I'm here speaking as the sheriff of Humboldt County. I don't represent the other 57 sheriffs in the state at this point. They can speak on their own, but I know that for my deputies in the field and for the things that we have going on in Humboldt County, we need some type of legislation that's going to help us and give us a defining roadmap as to where we go with this thing. We're more than willing to deal with things as they come about. We talked about earlier today about law enforcement adapting. We've learned to adapt. We have to adapt all the time to different laws and different regulatory issues that come along. So this is something we'll adapt to too. Anything else to do with marijuana beyond this will be another battle. But I believe on the medical realm, we need to address it. We can't bury our heads in the sand any longer on this issue. So I would say that we need to go forward with this, and I support what these gentlemen are trying to do today. Thank you.
And finally, our final speaker here, and certainly not last but not least, is Dan Erzman, the Executive Director of the North Coast Environmental Center.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Erzman, Executive Director of the North Coast Environmental Center, and also a proud resident of the North Coast and living on the shores of Humboldt Bay. And first off, I want to say a big thank you to our Assembly Member Jim Wood and to Assembly Members Rob Bonta and Tom Lackey who have brought us here today, and to the many organizations and individuals that have put so much work into getting this timely legislation through our state legislature. I do want to go off script and thank a lot of the folks that are here today, to the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, to the county staff, to the many organizations that support this epic, safe California Fish and Wildlife. So many folks that have been working on this, and I do want to recognize all the time and energy at the local level. It is no secret that in our region, in the heart of the Emerald Triangle, the environmental impacts related to an unregulated industry are severe. Watersheds are literally being tapped dry, hillsides are being raised, communities are impacted from increased crime and environmental degradation. California is 20 years overdue for a regulatory framework that will help rein in the impacts of an out-of-control industry. The legislation put forward here by Assembly Members Wood, Lackey, and Bonta is an important step in the right direction, and once enacted, it will be a vast improvement to the ongoing lawlessness that is despoiling rivers, threatening salmon populations, and adversely impacting so many lives. These bills will provide the local jurisdictions with much needed ability to regulate and the land use activities whose impacts have gotten so far out of hand. The bills will also allow local governments to impose an excise tax on cannabis to bring in much needed funding for enforcement, environmental restoration, and education. Residents of the North Coast are tired of the greed-driven destruction, and voices are united in saying it is time to rein in the impacts of the green rush. On behalf of the North Coast Environmental Center, our members that are standing here today, and the many supporters that are here today, we urge you, Governor Brown, to take decisive action by signing this critical legislation into law. Thank you.
Well, thank you once again. I want to summarize and just close here, and then we will take a couple questions. We've got a few minutes. These guys have to catch a plane here, but I want to say a couple of things. First of all, this truly was a team effort. It was five members of the State Assembly and a member of the Senate working together on a package, and we came together at the end of the day and put 3 bills on the governor's desk, and that's never been done before. And it is unprecedented. We think it's historic, and we firmly believe the governor will sign these. One thing missing from the package, which was near and dear to my heart, was an excise tax on cultivation. And we pulled that out at the last minute. We've reintroduced it. It'll go forward in January, and we'll move that forward. The purpose of that excise tax was to raise money for 3 things. Number 1, to permanently fund the watershed enforcement team, to actually give growers an opportunity to be able to come into compliance with reasonable best practices around cultivation. The second part was for increased resources for law enforcement, to be able to go after the bad actors and try to get more people to go into compliance. And the third component that money is going to go to is to clean up the damage that has been caused in our watersheds. And that would be through a grant program. So those are the things, that's the part of the bill that's missing. But put that aside and just look at the tremendous progress we have made here. This is the beginning. This is not the end. As we move forward, you're going to see more and more. This is a topic now that is a big discussion in the Capitol. One of 3, I think they're probably the 3 largest discussions in the Capitol this year. And so it's an honor to be a part of this, and we're not going to stop. The final part is I want to give a shout out to Joey Louise, who's here today representing Board of Equalization member Fiona Ma. And the significance of that is that one of the things that we know, which is a real problem for this industry, is the amount of cash that is involved. So I'm going to be working closely with the former Assembly member and now BOE member Fiona Ma on a bill that will help with banking, to actually create, hopefully, a bank in California that will allow for the safety of the cash in this particular business. So we hope that has been introduced. That's AB 1549, and that was also introduced on September 11th, right before we closed. So we could not have done this without the tremendous leadership that you see here with Mr. Lackey, with Mr. Bonta, with Mr. Cooley from the Rancho Cordova area, Mr. Jones Sawyer from Los Angeles, and Senator McGuire from my hometown of Healdsburg. So we thank you very, very much for being here, and we've got a couple minutes, so if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to field those. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you firmly believe the governor will sign these bills. And yet you're also here to call for him to take action. What's your read on why the governor hasn't taken action yet?
So the question is, I firmly believe the governor will sign the bills, and so why are we here urging him? Well, I believe that, there's no such thing as too many voices. So we believe he will sign the bills. And why is he waiting till now? This is a controversial issue, and I suspect that, like the Right to Die bill, which he signed yesterday, he's given a lot of thought to this particular issue. We believe he will sign the bills. He engaged with all of the authors in the last 10 days of the session, and we worked closely with the governor's office on this, and we believe that in the end, that signals his desire to actually move this package forward. Yes?
If he doesn't sign it, will the 3 of you get together and try and find another plan?
I would rather not. The question is, if he doesn't sign it, will you get together and work on another plan? I really hope we don't have to go there. I tend to be the optimist and say he's going to sign this for us and we're going to move forward. But this is not a topic that's going to go away, and so absolutely we will absolutely move forward. If we're not successful, we'll continue the fight. Absolutely.
You mentioned the excise tax was something that would need to be followed up on later. What are some other cleanup portions of the bills that were not addressed in these versions that you are hoping to move forward with?
Well, there may be some things in 266 that I'm not aware of, but yes, this is the beginning. When you put all the language essentially was vetted for months and months and months. It was also then just kind of came together at the very, very end. So there are things that are going to need to be addressed. The excise tax is a big one, and that has been reintroduced as a separate bill, and I believe we will pass that next year. But there are some other things, and I'll let Assemblymember Bonta address that if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and I just also want to take this opportunity to emphasize the collaborative nature of this effort in the Assembly, and besides Dr. Wood and Mr. Lackey, who are here, thank my colleagues who aren't here in the Assembly, Mr. Reggie Jones-Sawyer and Mr. Cooley, for their tremendous leadership. We did this as a team. And again, when you have something that's been overdue for 19 years, and you put together a comprehensive set of bills and put them on the governor's desk, there will be areas that can be strengthened in the future. So just two examples of areas that might need cleanup in the future. One is Measure D in Los Angeles, how our bill addresses the voice of the locals in Los Angeles with respect to Measure D. That could require some clarification in the future. And also our suitability language, what we call our suitability language, which determines the process for who is able to get a license in the industry. That could also potentially have some clarification and cleanup in the future. So just two examples. I'm sure there will be others as well. Again, this is an ongoing process. This is a major step forward this year. It's historic, it's landmark. All those words are accurate in terms of where we are today. But as Dr. Wood said, it's also an ongoing effort. We'll need to continue to do the work. It will include cleanup and clarification, and also moving into different areas like banking and an excise tax.
Thank you.
Once signed, how long do you figure it's going to take for it to come into effect?
Great question, Glenn. Well, it's a great question. Actually, it's going to go through a significant regulatory process, and based on the language in the bill, it'll be January 2018 when a lot of this takes effect. So the hope is that we can move this along faster. The fact that we are actually putting the regulatory system will fall within existing, for the most part, within existing structure within the government. California Department of Food and Agriculture, Department of Consumer Affairs. So those are things that'll fall within. You're not necessarily not creating something completely new. You're actually using existing agencies to move forward. However, things like public health and testing and things like that are going to take some time. So 2018 is when we expect that this will actually go fully online.
And if I could just add something to that, through the collaborative process that the Assembly took, we also engaged stakeholders from throughout California, throughout the industry, literally met with stakeholders for thousands of hours and got input on nearly every aspect of the medical cannabis industry. And we proposed a lot of detail in some prior versions of the bill that will now be sent to the departments for regulation. So they have a really good starting place from what we proposed, and they might end up where we started. But the governor certainly wanted to have some influence on what the regulations look like, so he'll have that opportunity, but it will be informed by hours and hours of stakeholder process and a set of proposals that we have already set forth that include a lot of consensus from those stakeholders. So it could get done before 2018. There's no penalty for getting this online earlier, but as a backstop, January 1, 2018.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody. We can stick around. I'll be around for a while. I know these guys have to catch a plane here quickly, but thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate that. And yes. Oh, you had it. Okay. Yes, you just waving hands. Okay, thank you.